Tonight, a murder mystery that haunted Albany for more than 6 decades finally solved. Police say they have cracked the 1964 killing of Katherine Blackburn.
This woman played by the rules. Pews by 6 in the morning every Sunday, sweeping the stoop every Saturday dusk. 3 decades at one gig. Spotless home, balanced ledgers, and a daily rhythm so precise it was practically mechanical. But rigid habits cannot stop a monster. Fall of 1964. 50-year-old Katherine Blackburn unlatched her deadbolt for a complete unknown. Hours later, she lay butchered, bludgeoned, punctured, and carved up with glowing hot cutlery on her own Albany floorboards, while her executioner faded into the shadows. Zero cuffs, zero courtroom drama. For 61 agonizing years, grieving relatives physically scrubbed her dried blood off their walls. They wasted their entire lives praying for closure that remained dead and buried, until suddenly, everything shifted. Here is how New York's most savage, deeply buried cold case finally shattered into a million pieces. We are not talking jailhouse snitches or eyewitnesses. The smoking gun was a discarded cloth, trapped beneath her rotting corpse for 60 years. Before unraveling this twisted resolution, we have to dig into the actual identity of Katherine Blackburn, since the exact manner she navigated life holds the dark key to her assassination. Born March 1st, 1914, Katherine Beck grew up in a strict, massive Polish immigrant household in Albany. Catholicism ran through their veins. We are talking about militant devotion, the kind of religion that absolutely dominated their existence beyond Sunday sermons. Dogma dictated every single choice, bond, and breathing moment they experienced. For the woman everyone knew as Kate, this intense piety morphed into her ultimate armor and her most suffocating curse. She triggered an irreversible domino effect in her youth, a fatal mistake that stalked her from the shadows for decades. July 3, 1938. 24-year-old Kate tied the knot with Jesse Blackburn at a secular courthouse desk, avoiding the altar. Jesse carried serious baggage from a prior marriage. Under strict Vatican laws, a sacred ceremony was strictly off-limits. She swallowed that bitter pill, but regret hit instantly. Jesse flew for the military, dragging her across endless bases and foreign dirt. Kate despised the nomadic chaos. She desperately craved the familiar concrete of Albany and the safety of her siblings. Diving into their surviving correspondence, a chilling realization surfaces: these two were completely incompatible strangers. She operated with military precision. He was a chaotic, impulsive liability who could never hold on to a dollar. The toxic cohabitation fractured rapidly, yet Kate refused to legally sever ties. Walking away just was not an option. To her, ripping up a marriage license meant burning in hell. She swore an oath to the Almighty, refusing to flinch even when he betrayed it. The couple drifted into entirely parallel universes, with him eventually vanishing off the map into Japan. She anchored herself in Albany, grinding away at the Mohawk Brush Company, a grueling sentence she endured for 3 solid decades. Clawing her way from the grime of the assembly lines up to management. Meanwhile, Jesse tossed her breadcrumbs through sporadic mail. Twisted enough, his mistresses would even drop her notes. And whenever he hit rock bottom financially, Kate always wired funds. It was her tragic flaw. Blindly devoted, shackled by her own brutal moral code, no matter the psychological toll, yet Kate harbored a profound, dark secret. A hidden reality completely concealed from her inner circle, remaining buried until she was literally in the ground. Keep that in mind. Fast forward to 1964. 50-year-old Kate sat totally isolated inside her duplex at 117 Colony Street. Deep in the gritty, blue-collar veins of North Albany, she maintained an impeccably spotless property. Delicate floral arrangements masked the exterior, while she occupied the ground level, leasing out the upper floor for survival cash. The community adored her. She was a silent, fiercely guarded soul, running on an endless loop of monotony. Locals literally synced their watches to her daily movements. Saturday twilights meant sweeping the concrete. Sunday dawn at 6 in the morning meant a solitary trek to St. Joseph's Sanctuary. Come weekday mornings, her pal Marie would idle at the curb, and Kate would reliably emerge for their carpool grind. That rigid schedule kept her alive. So when the gears suddenly ground to a halt, the neighborhood instantly sensed the creeping dread. September 12th, 1964. Following a brutal half-shift at the plant, Kate dragged herself home right at midday. The unit above her sat dangerously vacant, recently abandoned by long-term renters fleeing a sudden family tragedy. She had plastered vacancies in the Knickerbocker paper for months. The final print circulated on September 4th, a mere 8 days prior to the horror. Word on the street was she locked in a new renter, a stocky guy pushing 50. He slapped down $10, claiming he and his elderly mother were taking over in October. Yet, this mysterious stranger tripped every single one of Kate's internal alarms. Every single detail she unearthed about this stranger just fueled a creeping sense of absolute dread. He claimed he lived at 369 2nd Avenue, an upscale slice of Albany that clashed hard with Kate's gritty blue-collar block. Downgrading to her side of the tracks? The math on that simply didn't add up. Adding fuel to the fire, the guy reeked of cheap liquor when he toured the rental unit. Her paranoia peaked on Wednesday, September 9th. Just 3 days before she was slaughtered, she convinced an acquaintance to drive her to that supposed residence. She needed physical proof that this guy wasn't a phantom. The driver's identity actually connects to a dark secret Kate hid from her own blood, but we will unravel that later. That night, they cruised down 2nd Avenue. The street existed, sure, but the dead of night made pinpointing property number 369 practically impossible. Defeated, they headed back. Her suspicions remained unresolved, and within 72 hours, she would be a corpse. Fast forward to Saturday the 12th, somewhere between 5 and 6 in the evening. Locals spotted her casually sweeping her front steps like clockwork. That mundane chore was Katherine Blackburn's final public appearance. Shortly after, she hopped on a call with her sister. The sibling offered to drop off a hot meal, but Kate brushed her off, mentioning a prospective renter was stopping by. Those were the last words she ever spoke to her family. By Sunday morning, her usual pew at the 6 o'clock Mass sat completely empty. She vanished from the 8 o'clock service as well. For a devout believer who lived and breathed church, this absence screamed red flags. As the afternoon dragged on, locals realized her yard remained totally untouched. No fresh laundry on the line, no weekly trash fires. These were deeply ingrained Sunday rituals. A quiet dread settled over the block, yet nobody intervened before Monday rolled around. Marie Hogan arrived for their standard morning commute. When the front door remained shut, Marie banged on the wood, her gut twisting with anxiety when silence answered. Panicking, Marie dialed the victim's 19-year-old niece, Sandy. Having a brief window before her own shift, the teenager agreed to investigate the property. She begged her sibling Marianne for backup, but the girl was tied up with morning classes. The 10th grader had to pass, forcing Sandy to grab Aunt Anna, the victim's other sister. Together, they pounded on the main entrance. Dead silence. The desperate teens started chucking gravel at the glass panes, praying for a reaction, but the house felt utterly lifeless. Bypassing a suspiciously unlatched cellar hatch, they crept through the shadowy basement. Navigating upward into the communal hallway, they discovered the victim's primary entryway swinging freely. Stepping over the threshold, they scanned the barren ground level. The older woman was absolutely nowhere to be found. Rumor had it, she was prepping the vacant second-story unit with a fresh coat of paint, prompting the two women to ascend the creaky staircase. The upper unit's doorway gaped wide open like a dark cavern. Inside, sprawled across the living area planks, lay their beloved relative. The terrified 19-year-old scrambled to phone for medical backup. However, upon arrival, emergency responders made zero effort to resuscitate. They immediately radioed homicide detectives. Katherine Blackburn was the victim of a brutal slaying. Law enforcement walked into an absolute nightmare, easily among Albany's most grotesque historical cases. The sheer, cold-blooded precision of it all is what truly haunts the archives. Forget crimes of passion or sudden snaps. This execution was unhurried, agonizingly deliberate, and bathed in pure psychopathy. The assailant turned the woman's sanctuary into a slaughterhouse, weaponizing her personal sanctuary and everyday utensils to end her life. Every instrument of torture was sourced directly from her own cabinets. While the corpse rested in the upper lounge, the actual massacre initiated elsewhere. Crimson splatter patterns proved the ambush kicked off right at the threshold, connecting the second-story cooking area to the rear sleeping quarters. She had unknowingly escorted her future butcher up those steps for a standard walkthrough. As she slipped away to fetch a keybox from her ground-floor suite, the predator quietly armed himself, snatching a culinary mallet or compact hammer from her countertops. The moment she turned her back on the second floor, he unleashed a barrage of crushing blows to her cranium, easily splintering bone. Several of the victim's digits were completely shattered. Human instinct made her clutch her bleeding scalp after the initial impact, meaning the subsequent swings pulverized her hands. Let that horrific imagery sink in. Her final moment of awareness was a desperate, futile attempt to shield her brain before she crumpled face first into the floorboards. Unfazed, the monster descended the stairs, casually strolling through her culinary space to handpick a specialized blade. He carried the steel back up, forcefully rolling her limp frame over before plunging it into her left profile, followed by a vicious strike straight down her windpipe. That secondary puncture completely shredded her carotid artery. She rapidly bled out on the bare wood of the very unit she hoped to lease. Yet the phantom's sick work was far from finished as he retraced his steps to the lower level. Forcing his way into a wooden keepsake trunk, he extracted pristine white linens before plucking a pair of cushions directly off the deceased woman's mattress. He hauled her lifeless weight away from the cooking area, frantically attempting to mop up the expanding crimson lake, but the hemorrhage was simply unstoppable. Abandoning the cleanup, he tossed the saturated fabrics aside. That dark puddle would slowly drip right through the ceiling, raining horror down into her sanctuary below. What kind of phantom leaves such a dark signature? Her garments were violently shoved upward, twisting tightly around her throat. He sliced through her underclothes in the pitch-black upper unit, forcing him to creep back down to her kitchen area. Laying her own culinary blades across the open gas flames, he patiently watched the steel glow scorching hot. Hauling that glowing metal upstairs, he branded twisted, agonizing patterns across her chest and mouth. It wasn't a singular act. He made countless agonizing trips, methodically rotating the scorching steel. Never rushing, he concealed his twisted tools beneath the range before committing an unspeakable violation, abandoning crucial biological traces. But before vanishing into the night, he ransacked her living room cabinet and located the tenant payment ledger. She painstakingly documented every single housing transaction, always handing off a duplicate to the renter. The master copies remained bound. Our phantom ripped away the final entry, along with 4 subsequent sheets and their attachments. He thought he was scrubbing his identity from the solitary document, linking him to the crime scene, completely oblivious. Heavy pen strokes permanently score the parchment directly underneath. Music. The physical sheets were missing, yet the ghosted indentations of her cursive remained perfectly preserved. Those microscopic grooves offered detectives an alias, sparking a multi-state, decades-long pursuit that ultimately ended at a tombstone. Keep in mind, her relatives were totally blind to her hidden double life, and the truth was about to detonate. Over 1,000 mourners packed into St. Joseph's Church to bid farewell to the victim. 11 colleagues carried her casket, while the Mohawk Brush Company completely halted operations to mourn. Law enforcement lurked just blocks away, scrutinizing every single mourner for signs of guilt. Detectives even bugged her coffin, praying the monster would murmur a dark confession. Absolute silence followed. Music. However, a shocking revelation hit her kin that afternoon. She had been harboring a 16-year romance. Enter Ben Masson, a local grocer and polio survivor who navigated the world with severe physical impairments. Residing with his mom, he was profoundly devoted to her. Yet she stayed legally bound to Jesse, hiding Ben entirely. As a devout Catholic, stepping outside her marriage was considered wicked, though officially splitting up carried equal stigma. Cornered by 2 brutal ultimatums, she opted for total secrecy over risking the condemnation of her tight-knit clan. The cultural divide was equally immense. She was a Polish Catholic, while her lover practiced Judaism. In 1960s Albany, such pairings caused massive scandals, yet she desperately wanted him to observe her reality from afar. Whenever her niece Sandy pulled shifts at the Carville dairy counter, the forbidden couple parked discreetly out of plain sight. She would dispatch him to grab treats just to orchestrate a brief interaction with an utterly oblivious Sandy. Dismissed as just another patron, he represented her brilliant, invisible tether, linking 2 heavily guarded lives without risking collision. The brutal murder absolutely shattered his entire world. He informed investigators about visiting her porch that Saturday evening to utter silence, mirroring his fruitless return the following day. After dialing her home nearly 10 separate occasions throughout the weekend, he was met with dead air forever. Remaining completely transparent with authorities, he was quickly cleared, just a broken soul mourning his secret partner of 16 years. Post-funeral, Sandy and cousin Teresa returned to 117 Colony Street, both scarcely 20 years of age. Together, they undertook a grim task no teenager should ever stomach. They scrubbed the macabre aftermath from the hardwood, volunteering out of sheer terror that their own mother might witness the horror. A colossal manhunt erupted immediately, with task forces hunting down whispers across several state lines. Authorities even probed Albert DeSalvo, the infamous Boston Strangler, given his precise history of preying upon isolated females indoors. They scrutinized Lemuel Smith, an imprisoned monster from neighboring Amsterdam, infamous for his savage, violating trademarks on innocent targets. Both theories hit brick walls. Their sole beacon was that ghosted signature pulled from the ledger, Robert Broadhead, or something similar. Forensics confidently confirmed the moniker Robert, while the surname remained stubbornly cryptic, Broadhead Branstead. Music. The listed residence read 369 2nd Avenue. Cops tracked down every single Albany local bearing that title. Music. They knocked on doors at the 2nd Avenue property. They even scoured identical street numbers across different zip codes, but every promising thread unraveled into dust. Music. A total phantom alias. The location proved worthless, and their butcher remained invisible. Yet, one investigator absolutely refused to surrender. Lieutenant Edmund Ted Flint anchored this chilling dossier atop his unsolved pile for decades, haunted relentlessly by the phantom who slipped away. Imagine hunting a ghost your entire career, taking that failure to the grave. He died clueless about who slaughtered Katherine Blackburn, as days bled into agonizing months. Months stretched into years, and years faded into decades. They tore down Kate's home, paving over the past until the entire block was unrecognizable. The original investigators slowly aged out of the force. A few took their last breaths still haunted by her memory, a dark obsession shared deeply by Sandy. Fast forward to August 2018. Detective Melissa Morey was grinding away inside the Forensic Investigation Bureau for the Albany Police Department. Her spouse had just returned from a gathering of former cops, sharing dark whispers about the unsolved mysteries that still kept them awake at night. For the veteran force, one sinister name kept echoing in the room: Kate Blackburn. Hearing this, a sudden realization struck Melissa like a jolt of electricity. Aware that the precinct housed decaying evidence from forgotten eras, she yanked Kate's dusty file from the archives. The contents left her completely paralyzed. Every single shred of physical proof from 1964 was sitting right there. The bloodied garments, bed linens, blades, and that crucial cloth pinned beneath her corpse, all of it flawlessly maintained as if frozen in time. Operating eras before genetic profiling even existed, those early cops intuitively wore hand protection, securing and cataloging every artifact with eerie precision. Without realizing it, they had buried a forensic treasure chest for tomorrow's investigators, completely blind to whether it would ever be unsealed. Then, an unbelievable coincidence shattered reality. Kate's niece, the very same 19-year-old girl who stumbled upon the butchered corpse, lived right next door. Sharing the exact same block, Sandy used to chat amiably about the detective's pet during their routine neighborhood strolls. The investigator was utterly oblivious that this sweet senior citizen held ties to one of Albany's most savage, deeply concealed slaughters. That following November, academic expert Dr. Christina Lane spearheaded a brand new unit dedicated to frozen investigations at a local Albany college. Now in her 70s, Sandy caught wind of the broadcast and immediately fell back on her 50-year routine. She made the call. Pleading for their expertise, her inquiry pushed the academic hub to alert local law enforcement, landing Melissa Morey straight in the driver's seat of the hunt. The sinister puzzle was finally aligning. You had a relentless cop refusing to drop the scent. You had a university lab engineered specifically for resurrecting dead leads, and a grieving relative who spent her life screaming for justice. Spanning the next several years, the detective and Dr. Lane aggressively tore through every potential testing route, only to repeatedly slam into brick walls. Faced with constant rejections and dead ends, Melissa later compared the grueling process to an endless academic study filled with agonizingly empty voids. Drowning in negative updates and endless pushback, their luck suddenly pivoted when they matched the perfect artifact with the perfect facility. The golden ticket was that damn piece of fabric, the very rag pulled from beneath the victim's remains back in 1964. By 2023, local law enforcement joined forces with Othram, a cutting-edge genetic testing firm operating deep in Texas. Bankrolled by a charitable group called Season of Justice, scientists deployed an ultra-sterile liquid vacuum to pull microscopic biology from the 60-year-old rag. Utilizing elite, criminal-grade genomic mapping, they successfully constructed a shockingly complete biological blueprint. They immediately kicked that genetic blueprint straight up to the Federal Bureau. Federal specialists cross-referenced the code through ancestry systems, the exact playbook used to nail the Golden State Killer snagging hits on his distant bloodline. Methodically reverse engineering entire generations of relatives, the task force zeroed in on a lone target who passed away in 1998 without ever triggering police radar. Detectives quietly approached his living kin. Yielding without a fight, the family handed over their own swabs. The preliminary data screamed that they had their monster, but legally, they needed an airtight lock. By the morning of September 15th, 2025 61 years and a day post-slaughter authorities converged silently on a remote upstate graveyard. Armed with a judge's mandate, they exhumed the dirt and cracked open a tomb. Extracting bone fragments from the leg and arm, they rushed the grim harvest to the technicians. Weeks crawled by until the verdict dropped, a flawless, terrifying match. On October 8, 2025, the city's top brass stepped up to the microphones and finally exposed the phantom's identity. Joseph Stanley Nowakowski. Born locally in August 1931, a 33-year-old butcher when he struck, rotting in the ground since 1998. His rap sheet painted a horrifying picture. Busted at barely 18 for a string of break-ins. Post-military, cops nabbed him at the transit hub hauling a literal murder kit, a chambered firearm, spring action knives, a heavy pry bar, master keys, shackles, window-cutting tools, and meticulously sketched residential blueprints spanning several towns, paired with news clippings tracking when rich victims left for holidays. This guy wasn't just lifting televisions. He was an apex predator hunting human prey with chilling, methodical precision. Jump to 1973, 9 years post-slaughter. A 74-year-old local woman woke, drenched in her own blood with a shattered skull from a savage axe blitz. The solitary victim survived, while the phantom assailant slipped up, leaving a solitary leather mitt and a gold tooth cap at the scene. 5 days later, a blitz Nowakowski wrecked his vehicle, leading patrol officers straight to a gore-soaked hatchet sitting inside the wreckage. The dental cap fit perfectly. The mitt was a dead ringer. He took a plea, pulling 3 to 15 years before walking free in 1980. He vanished entirely into the shadows, taking his final breath in 1998, completely dodging the Blackburn slaughter, until a scrap of cloth and modern science finally screamed what the clues had been whispering for 60 years. Can a 61-year-old ghost finally speak? Sandy Carmichael approached the press microphone. Now 81, she was merely 19 when she stumbled upon her aunt's slaughtered body. 61 agonizing years of unanswered nightmares followed. She declared that pure darkness infiltrated their home 6 decades prior, fracturing their reality entirely. 61 years prior, malevolence breached my aunt's sanctuary, permanently shattering our entire existence. Acknowledging decades of desperate prayers, she expressed profound gratitude to the tireless investigators involved. Mary Ann simmered, another grieving niece, paralyzed the crowd with one inquiry: do miracles exist? For her bloodline, one certainly had. Following 61 chilling winters, Katherine Blackburn's butcher was identified. Chief Cox warned the crowd that cold cases are an absolute illusion. What truly haunts my thoughts isn't the savage violence, nor the miraculous genetic science triumph. Rather, it is the relentless souls who fought against letting Katherine fade into a neglected, cobweb-covered cabinet. Those 1964 investigators hoarding unusable clues for future science. Or Ted Flint, keeping her dossier front and center until his retirement. Or Melissa, overhearing the gruesome tale during a gathering and secretly vowing to somehow intervene. Doctors Lane and Chris Kungle, constructing an entire institution dedicated solely to unearthing truths for abandoned casualties. Those brilliant lab experts extracting genetic markers from a 60-year-old rag to finally unmask a phantom. Then there is Sandy, 19 when she scrubbed her aunt's gore to shield her mother, embarking on a lifelong desperate quest for justice. Dialing investigators again in 2018 while in her 70s, reaching 81 before the horrific truth finally surfaced. Her strict moral code practically imprisoned her. Katherine worshipped faithfully through both peaceful and deeply turbulent seasons alike. Bound by duty, she remained shackled in a loveless marriage. Her true romance stayed buried in the shadows to preserve her family's pristine reputation. Playing the role of an accommodating landlord, she unknowingly invited a vicious predator inside to view a rental. A simple transaction cost her everything. Joseph Nowakowski perished in 1998, entirely dodging handcuffs for this brutal slaughter. Bypassing trial benches and jury boxes entirely, the killer technically cheated the legal system's righteous wrath. Yet reality caught up. 61 years post-mortem, his corpse was unearthed, officially branding his legacy not as human, but as an absolute monster. Amidst that crowded presser, an 81-year-old survivor released a breath she had been holding her entire adult existence. Katherine was entombed at St. Agnes in 1964. Nowakowski rotted nearby at Albany Rural. Predator and prey rested mere miles apart, divided only by a quick commute and 60 years of dark secrets. Those quiet shadows are permanently gone. Before clicking away, let's dissect these sinister implications together. Could this butcher be the phantom behind other local cold cases? A predator stalking solitary women, constantly armed with lockpicks and blades, hunting meticulously. Authorities strongly suspect Katherine wasn't his sole massacre. Sound off in the comments. This mystery cracked solely due to 1964 officers guarding completely unusable forensic artifacts. How many unidentified monsters lurk in dusty property lockers, desperately waiting for modern science to finally expose their identities? Are there active psychopaths walking free, simply because a forgotten bloodstain remains entirely untested? As for Katherine, she hid her 16-year romance out of sheer terror regarding her strict family's intense backlash. Would her bloodline have eventually embraced the affair, or was that era far too draconian? Leave your theories below. If this dark investigation gave you chills, pass it around. Katherine warrants memorializing beyond her savage demise, but for her true spirit. The tragic fate of Linda O'Keefe serves as a haunting reminder that while innocence can be stolen in an instant, the pursuit of truth is a flame that never truly dies. In 1973, an 11-year-old girl vanished during a mundane walk home from summer school in Newport Beach, a sun-drenched sanctuary where parents once believed monsters didn't exist. Her story is a visceral lesson on the shattering of communal trust and the lethal deception of normalcy. The most chilling educational takeaway is that evil often hides in plain sight. For 45 years, James Allen Rice lived a seemingly ordinary life, a trusted neighbor who committed an unspeakable atrocity and then simply blended back into the fabric of society. His ability to evade justice for decades is a stark warning. We must remain vigilant, for a predator's normalcy is often his most effective camouflage. Ultimately, Linda's legacy is a victory for forensic perseverance. It reminds us that every microscopic trace of evidence is a silent witness biding its time. A solitary biological stain, preserved for nearly half a century, eventually shattered a 45-year-old lie through the power of genetic genealogy. We honor Linda by fiercely protecting the vulnerable and believing that no matter how deep a secret is buried, the light of science and the relentless human spirit will eventually find it.